The Swiss Family Robinson, Chapter 9, Building a Bridge. Next morning, my wife and I rose early and took counsel together as to our future proceedings. I have been considering your plan, I said, and I think we ought not hastily to change our abode. We are protected in case of danger on all sides by sea, the rocks, and the banks of the stream. And most important of all, we are near to the ship, which is still a mine of wealth to us. All very well, answered my wife, but you do not know how unbearable it is, the heat. It is so suffocating in the tent as to make me anxious about the children's health. And our only refreshment is the mussels and oysters which we gather on the shore. As for the safety you prize so much, did it save us from the jaguars? The treasures on board the vessel are not to be despised, I know. But I would renounce them gladly to be spared the anxiety your sea voyages to secure them occasion to me. I acknowledge there was some force in the arguments of my wife, but I think we can make a compromise, I said. I will consent to change our residence to your favorite trees on condition that we retain this settlement among the rocks as a provision store and as kind of a fortress to which we can retire in time of danger. If this plan be adopted, the first thing we must do is to throw a bridge across the stream, so as to make communication between the two places quite easy. A bridge? Exclaimed my wife in astonishment. The construction of a bridge will be a tedious labor, but we could load the donkey and the cow with our baggage and cross the river as we did before. I assured my dear wife that she was exaggerating both the difficulty of the work and the obstacles that stood in our way. And she acknowledged at last that I was right. We therefore decided that the work should be commenced at once. For, said she, I am anxious to leave this place as soon as possible. The boys were quickly aroused, and on hearing the plan of building a bridge, we were full of eager anticipation and delight. After breakfast, Fritz took the monkey to the goat for his morning feast. Jack slipped away to the cow and tried to milk her into a gourd. But as he could not succeed, his mother took the vessel and showed him how to do it. As Jack saw how cleverly she drew the milk, he said, "Ah, if I had only known how to do it like that. But I mean to learn, and then I can help Mama." In the meantime, I prepared our boat for a voyage to the ship, to obtain planks and beams for building the bridge, and as soon as breakfast was over, I set off with Fritz and Ernest, for as it was necessary to accomplish our purpose quickly, double help was needed. Rowing out to sea, we soon got into the current of the stream we had already found so useful. Passing an islet at the entrance of the bay, we saw a number of gulls, albatrosses, and other seabirds congregated about some object on the shore. Fritz prepared to fire amongst them, but I forbade him. I knew so extraordinary a gathering must be caused by something unusual, and I was anxious to find out what it was. I hoisted the sail to take advantage of the slight breeze that we sprung up, and we soon reached the islet. We then discovered that it was the carcass of a monster fish which had been cast ashore, on which the birds were regaling themselves so eagerly that they did not notice our approach until we were within gunshot of them. "Why, Fritz," cried Ernest, "this must be the shark you shot yesterday." "Yes, indeed, Ernest," said Fritz, not a little proud of his achievement. Ernest drew out the ramrod of his gun and struck at the birds right and left. Some were so voracious that they refused to abandon their prey and were knocked down and killed. We cut off a few strips of shark skin, which I thought might prove useful to us. Then we returned to the boat. But this was not the only fruit of our visit to the island, for I saw with joy that a number of planks and beams had been loosened from the wreck and cast on the sands by the waves. They were admirably adapted for my purpose, and would thus save me the trouble of seeking them on the vessel. So I determined to select those most suitable for building our bridge. And with the help of the two boys, we soon had them afloat and fastened with ropes to our boat. Once more we put to sea, and presently lay alongside our landing place, having returned in less than 4 hours from the time we restarted. We were not expected, and none of our dear ones were there to welcome us. I shouted, however, to attract their attention, and they soon came running. Frank with the fishing rod over his shoulder, and Jack with a number of large lobsters in a handkerchief. Little Frank, with pride, began at once to explain that he had first discovered them, while Jack related how he had courageously waded into the water to get them. I congratulated both the boys on the success of their excursions, and I felt thankful that food for our wants was thus provided day by day. Turning in the direction of the stream, I proceeded with the boys to decide upon the most suitable place for the erection of the bridge. Jack suggested the spot, and I was anxious to see if he had made a wise choice. "If you have," said I, "we will immediately set out about bringing up the planks while your mother prepares our repast." After careful examination, I was in the opinion that the place was well suited for the purpose, and offered very few difficulties. We therefore set to work at once to transport the materials thither. The donkey and the cow were of the greatest help to us in this task. Calling to mind the simple harness in use by the Laplanders with their reindeer, I yoked the donkey by simply passing a loop of rope around its neck, and then carrying it through between its legs. I secured it to a piece of timber which I wished to draw ashore. The cow was in a similar manner harnessed by a rope attached to its horns, and we were thus able, with moderate difficulty, to drag the materials for the bridge to the chosen site. By means of a piece of string with a stone tied to one end, which we threw to the opposite bank, we were able to measure the width of the stream, and we soon discovered that the distance from one side of the river to the other was 18 feet. As it was necessary that the beam should be at least 3 additional feet resting on each shore to make the structure secure, this would require the under ones to measure about 24 feet. Fortunately, we found several which were, as they exceeded this length fully, answered our expectations. But how to get such long and heavy pieces of timber across the water was the next difficulty to be grappled with, for we were thoroughly fatigued with our labor, and we had already undergone. While considering the subject, my wife announced dinner, and we returned to the tent for the rest and refreshment. Our good housekeeper had boiled for us a dish of lobsters, which was very tempting, and prepared some rice. But before beginning, she asked us to inspect 2 immense bags which she had made out of a piece of sailcloth and had sewed with pack thread. As she had no needle large enough to hold the thread, she contrived to stitch the edges of the canvas together using a nail and an awl, and by patience and perseverance had finished 2 first-rate saddlebags to hang across the donkey's back like panniers, each of which would contain a great quantity of articles when we changed our home. I praised my dear wife for her ingenuity, and we all dispatched our dinner in haste and hurried back to our work. As we approached the spot, a feasible plan suggested itself, which I immediately put into execution. I secured one end of the beam to a trunk of a tree at about 4 or 5 feet above the ground, and to the other attached a long rope to which a stone was tied for throwing it across the river. I next crossed to the opposite bank and adjusted a pulley to another tree, through which I drew the rope and then returned with it to the end in my hand. To this end I harnessed the cow and the donkey. Then, passing the beam round to the front of the tree, I led the animals away from the water. As they moved slowly forward, the beam gradually rose, swung across the water to the opposite side, and then when I checked my novel pair of draught horses, I sank steadily into its place on the bank. Fritz and Jack at once sprang boldly on the beam and danced lightly and rapidly across the narrow bridge, somewhat to my alarm. The most difficult part of the work was now over. The 2nd, 3rd, and 4th beams were soon followed and were arranged at equal distances from each other, across which we laid planks of about 8 or 9 feet long, but did not nail them firmly, as we wished to be able to remove them quickly in case of danger, to prevent the passage of enemies, whether it's men or wild beasts. The bridge seemed in every point perfect. The supports were firm and the passage across complete, and I now summoned my wife to examine what she had persuaded herself was to be the labor of a lifetime. Both she and the children were astonished to see so difficult a piece of work accomplished so easily. The boys jumped about, clapping their hands and shouting triumphantly at the top of their voices, and we all ran over it backwards and forwards several times in our joy and excitement. The great exertion had exhausted our strength, and as evening approached, we knelt once more to offer our thanks to God for his merciful care of us during the day, and we retired to rest.